Myth or real, Ragnar Lothbrok. Imagine the sound. Not the sound of distant thunder, but the sound of hundreds of oars hitting the water in a frightening synchrony. Imagine the sight. Red and white striped sails emerging from the morning mist, and on the prow of each ship, a hungry dragon's head, promising fire and fury. For decades, this was Europe's nightmare. And at the heart of this nightmare, there was a name whispered in fear in the monasteries of England and the palaces of France. Ragnar Lothbrok. He is one of the most iconic figures of the Viking Age. The farmer who became a king, the pagan who challenged empires, the father of an army that would change history. His legend is an epic of adventure, cunning, brutality, and glory. But who was Ragnar Lothbrok? Looking through the mists of time, what do we find? Was he a man of flesh and blood, whose deeds were so great they became myth? Or is he the greatest hero of a mythology forged in ice and blood, a legend created to personify the Viking spirit itself? In this video, we will navigate the dangerous waters that separate fact from fiction. We will explore the sagas that tell his stories, investigate the historical records that try to find him, and discover how his legend continues to plunder our imagination to this day. And stay with us, because the story behind his strange nickname will surprise you. Did you know that the name Lothbrok, or Hairy Breeches, has nothing to do with fashion, but with a desperate fight against a dragon to save a princess? Every great legend has a starting point, and Ragnar's does not begin on a battlefield, but in the pages of ancient Icelandic manuscripts. The two main sources that paint the hero's portrait are the saga of Ragnar Hairy Breeches and the tale of Ragnar's sons, both written centuries after his supposed death. They were entertainment. They were poetry. They were a way for a people to tell themselves who they were. And they tell us a fantastic origin for our hero. According to the saga, Ragnar, still young, heard of a jarl, a nobleman from Sweden named Reginherus, who gave his daughter Thora a small serpent. The serpent grew so large it became a monster, a lindworm, that encircled the princess's castle, demanding a constant flow of oxen to feed itself and killing anyone who approached. The jarl promised his daughter's hand to any man brave enough to kill the creature. Ragnar, ambitious and fearless, accepted the challenge. But how to face a beast that spat venom? He created makeshift armor, wearing trousers and a cape of hairy hide, which he then dipped in pitch and sand. Protected by these hardened breeches, he faced the serpent. As the creature attacked him, Ragnar used his spear to pierce the monster's heart. He won, married Princess Thora, and from that day on, earned the nickname that would immortalize him, Lothbrok, Hairy Breeches. This is the first clue that we are dealing with something more than a simple historical record. It is a classic hero's story, a tale of dragons and damsels that serves to establish the superhuman character of our protagonist. But if we set aside the sagas and search for Ragnar in the dusty annals of the kingdoms he supposedly terrorized, the picture becomes blurry. There's not a single contemporary record, either Frankish or Anglo-Saxon, that mentions an all-powerful Viking king named Ragnar Lothbrok. So case closed? He didn't exist. Not so fast. The most accepted theory among historians is that Ragnar was not one man, but an amalgam, a composite legendary figure whose stories were inspired by the feats of several real Viking leaders. Let's meet the main suspects for having lent their deeds to the legend of Ragnar. Candidate number 1 is a Viking chief whom the Frankish annals call Reginherus. In 845 AD, this Reginherus led a colossal fleet of more than 120 Viking ships up the river Seine with an audacious goal: to sack Paris. The city, in a panic, was abandoned. Reginherus and his men took it without difficulty. The king of West Francia, Charles the Bald, instead of fighting, did what many would do in the following years: he paid. He handed Reginherus an astronomical sum of 7,000 pounds of silver to go away. It was one of the first and largest Danegeld payments in history, a dangerous precedent that showed all of Scandinavia that Europe was a treasure to be plundered. The attack on Paris is one of the pillars of Ragnar's legend, and Reginherus was there. Our second candidate is King Horik I of Denmark, a powerful Danish ruler who, although often in conflict with other Vikings, also launched devastating attacks against the empire of Charles the Bald. Some of the events attributed to Ragnar in the sagas align with the actions and influence of Horik. The truth is that the Viking Age, especially in the 9th century, was filled with charismatic and brutal warrior leaders. Men whose names were feared, but whose individual stories were lost in time, possibly absorbed by a larger, more memorable legendary figure, the figure of Ragnar Lothbrok. To understand why a legend like Ragnar's would arise, we need to understand the world he lived in. The 9th century was the apex of the Viking Age. The great empire of Charlemagne had fragmented, leaving rich but unstable and vulnerable kingdoms. The monasteries in England and Ireland were like banks without security, full of gold, silver, and precious manuscripts. At the same time, in Scandinavia, naval technology reached its peak with the Drakar, the dragon ship. Fast, durable, and with a shallow draft, it could cross open oceans and then sail up rivers, allowing the Vikings to strike at the heart of Europe where no one expected them. This perfect storm of European vulnerability and Scandinavian naval power created the stage for the rise of the great Viking leaders. As Ragnar's legend grew, it needed more than just battles. It needed drama, romance, a dynasty. And that came through his famous wives and his even more famous sons. The first is Lagertha, the Skjaldmø, the Shield Maiden. According to the Danish chronicler Saxo Grammaticus, Lagertha fought alongside Ragnar in battle, impressing him with her ferocity. She is the archetype of the Viking warrior woman, a figure of power and independence. Although immensely popular, most historians consider her a purely literary creation, a symbol of female strength in Norse mythology. After the death of his first wife, Thora, the dragon slayer's prize, Ragnar meets Aslaug. Her story is a saga in itself. The daughter of the legendary hero Sigurd and the Valkyrie Brynhildr, she was orphaned and raised in secret by poor peasants under the name Kraka, or Crow. When Ragnar's men find her, they are amazed by her beauty and intelligence. Ragnar, to test her, orders her to come to him, neither dressed nor undressed, neither hungry nor full, neither alone nor in company. Aslaug arrives dressed in a fishing net, biting an onion, and accompanied by a dog. Ragnar is so impressed with her intelligence that he marries her. It is with Aslaug that he will have the sons who will forge his true historical legacy. And what sons? Björn Ironside, Ivar the Boneless, Sigurd Snake in the Eye, Hvitserk, Ubba. Unlike their father, these men are much more concrete figures in history. Ivar the Boneless and his brothers were the leaders of the Great Heathen Army, an immense Viking invasion force that landed in England in 865. Their goal? It wasn't just to raid, it was to conquer. And according to the sagas, to avenge their father's death. The legend tells us that in his last ill-fated invasion of England, Ragnar was captured by his archenemy, King Gley of Northumbria. Determined to make an example of the great Viking, Glaf threw him into a pit full of venomous snakes. As the serpents bit him, Ragnar did not scream, he did not beg. He laughed and uttered his final prophecy, a warning to his executioner. How the little pigs would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers. The little pigs were his sons, and they heard. The invasion of the great heathen army was the boar's revenge, a real historical event, born from a legendary death. It is here that myth and reality collide with the greatest force. For centuries, Ragnar Lothbrok remained a figure of sagas and poems. But in 2013, everything changed. The television series Vikings brought Ragnar and his world to a global audience of millions. The series, created by Michael Hurst, did not try to be a documentary. It captured the spirit of the sagas. mixing historical characters, events, and timelines to create an epic family drama. In the series, we see a Ragnar who is both a brutal warrior and a curious farmer, fascinated by new cultures and new ideas. We see Rollo, who in real life was the first ruler of Normandy, transformed into his envious brother. We see the attack on the Lindisfarne Monastery, a historical event from 793, attributed to a Ragnar who historically would have acted decades later. These inaccuracies are not mistakes. They are narrative choices. The series did with Ragnar what the sagas themselves did centuries before. It took fragments of history, pieces of legend, and wove them into an appealing and powerful tapestry. The success of the series cemented Ragnar's image in pop culture, not as a complex and contested historical figure, but as the definitive Viking. His influence today extends beyond TV. He is a central character in video games like Assassin's Creed, Valhalla, inspires heavy metal bands, and has become a symbol of a certain wild and untamable masculinity. The archetype of the warrior hero whose real existence is uncertain is not exclusive to Ragnar. He walks alongside giants. Think of King Arthur, the British leader who became the king of the Round Table in Camelot. Think of Odysseus, the cunning king of Ithaca, whose adventures on his return from Troy define the Greek epic. These figures serve a deep cultural purpose. They are avatars for the values of a nation or an era. Arthur represents chivalry and unity. Odysseus, cunning and perseverance. Ragnar Lothbrok represents something more primordial. He is unbridled ambition, the curiosity that leads to discovery, the will to risk everything for glory and knowledge. He is the personification of the Viking Age itself, a force of nature, terrifying, transformative, and in the end, unforgettable. So we return to our big question: myth or reality? The answer, like Ragnar's own story, is not simple. There probably never was a single man named Ragnar Lothbrok who killed a serpent, married a hidden princess, sacked Paris, and was the father of the great heathen army. It is most likely that Ragnar is a river of stories that flowed into the ocean of mythology fed by the tributaries of real men. Reginherus, and countless other Vikings whose names have been lost in the waves of time. But in the end, perhaps it doesn't matter. The legend of Ragnar Lothbrok has become more real and more influential than any of his possible historical inspirations. History tells us what happened. Legends tell us how we feel about what happened. The question that remains is the absence of proof the proof of absence? Or is it just the mark of a man whose life was so extraordinary that history could not contain it, leaking into the realm of myth to become eternal? What do you think? Was Ragnar a real man, a constructed legend, or a powerful mixture of both? Leave your opinion here in the comments. We would love to know what you think. If you enjoyed this journey through history and myth, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos that explore the nebulous frontiers of our past. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next journey. Because in the end, the question is always the same: is it myth or real?